Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Gray. My name is Dr. Janice M. Gravely. I'm from 516 Fulton Street in Carthage, New York. I'm a 28-year retired veteran from the Army, and I retired in this area. I have three things that I'd like to talk about. First of all, I'm glad, thank you for the opportunity to be able to actually sit in on the meeting and see how things are done. And again, from a public policy perspective, it gives me the opportunity to learn. Secondly, per my email discussion with you, Mr. Gray, everyone knows there are a lot of things going on as it relates to racial discord and diversity conversation. I asked Mr. Gray if there are panel discussions, and as we are thinking about ways to mitigate concerns, if there are panels, I would like to be considered to be a part of the board to be able to talk about things from an interdisciplinary perspective so that we have different points of view as you're making your decisions. And the last thing for an upcoming session that you all have, I will be trying to present a legislative recommendation as it relates to contractors and their current ability to function as contractors without training, licensing, and the impact that it is having on different things, and I will provide specifics on that. Other than that, I thank you for your time, and I hope to be able to serve and work with you all in some capacity in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Gravely. Next.
Good evening. My name is Olivia Patterson, 18,000 NYS Route 177, Adams Center. I recently graduated from Belleville Henderson. As many of you know, the class of 2020 senior year was far from normal. We were unable to experience events that my classmates and I had looked forward to practically all our lives. We had no prom, senior trip, senior sports season, or honor night. Our senior year was cut short, and we were unable to experience a real graduation. We all knew, as of May 1st, that schools across the state would be closed for the remainder of the year, giving officials over a month of planning for graduation ceremonies, knowing that social gathering guidelines were repeatedly changing. However, no one ever consulted the people most affected by this, us seniors. We were all left in the dark. As protests were happening across the state, they had a large number of participants, and those participating were not practicing social distancing. In many cases, the number of protesters outnumbered those attending a high school graduation. On June 7th, the governor finally stated that high school graduations could be held outside of the maximum capacity of 150 people in attendance. We were so happy to hear this news. However, a majority of schools already had plans in place that complied with the past regulations. I believe that if representatives brought this case to the governor and stuck with it to support the class of 2020, we would have seen a change much sooner. With very few active cases in Jefferson County, did anyone explain this to the governor and make the case that the class of 2020 deserved a semi-normal graduation ceremony? I brought my case to my representatives for both the county and the state, and they were very receptive of the ideas I had, that all complied with the public gathering requirements in place. I was shocked by the lack of support that my fellow seniors saw from the government. And with that being said, what is being done about colleges opening in the fall? After a very difficult, stressful, and odd senior year, none of us want to be left in the dark anymore. We only have roughly 7 weeks until students expect to be back on campus, and yet we have heard little to nothing from anyone in regards to plans for schools reopening at the end of August. Everyone wants a fresh start, especially when it comes to starting college. It is known that things will look different for quite some time, but we need decisions made in a timely manner with results. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to read you what I wrote so I stay on track, okay? I know most of you here personally, so I'm thankful for the opportunity to come before you today to speak freely on behalf of my family, friends, neighbors, and community. For those who don't know me, my name is Meredith George. I'm a Christian, a wife to a United States Marine Corps veteran, and he is also a small business owner in this community, a mother to 4 beautiful daughters, and a proud American. I have called Jefferson County home for most of my life. As many of you, I come from a family whose fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers sacrificed much, and some gave all in the name of freedom. We were taught to honor and respect our flag, country, and president. We were taught that freedom is not free, that it was bought and paid for with the blood of patriots and heroes. My friends, today we're at a crossroads. We face many unanswered questions, which leads us to chaos and confusion. My God is not the author of confusion, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Being a leader is not an easy job. It comes with many challenges and often disappointment. The reason I stand before you today is to implore you to be the leaders the people voted for. You were chosen to represent us, to be our voices, and to stand for us. Today, many of us feel forgotten, ignored, vilified, and some even lost, like our lives don't matter. In a time when there is much hurt, anguish, and division among us, how can we sit idly by and remain silent? Family-owned businesses are permanently closing. People are filing for bankruptcy. Depression and addictions are on the rise. Children's futures have been put on hold. Violence and death have overtaken our cities. We are not allowed to freely worship as we choose. Our lives and liberties have been put on New York pause, and some have come to a complete standstill per the governor's executive order. One person should not have this kind of power. Laws are supposed to be passed by legislative bodies, not changed daily by edicts announced at press conferences. We are not living under the rule of law, but are being treated as subjects under the rule of men. We are judged daily in the court of public opinion by those who do not share the same love for freedom and country. Many of us are afraid to speak. We need you to hit the start button. We need you to stand up for our freedoms. Listen to us. Please speak for us. A wise friend of mine once said, a leader in a freedom-loving country would lead by urging citizens to take wise action. A leader in a tyranny tells his subjects what they must do for today until he issues a new edict for tomorrow. We are all essential. No one man should determine our worth or value. All men are created equal and are endowed by God with inalienable rights. We ask you to see each one of us and have compassion to lead with sound wisdom, integrity, and courage. In closing, Samuel Adams said, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men." We are the irate, tireless minority, and we choose freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Next.
Hi everyone, Tyler Bartlett, my wife Michelle Bartlett. We live on Ridgeview Road in the town of Watertown. We're here tonight to speak about our speedway, Can-Am Speedway, in regards to past events that have happened, and just want to get some information readily available to you guys and look to move forward together and figure out a solution. And pretty much going to let my wife, she's got a nice. Are we allowed to hand out stuff or leave it for you guys to grab later?
Thank you for allowing us time tonight. We are here today to continue to work collaboratively with you. We have continuously been in contact with members of this group throughout our planning for our reopening on June 5th. Unfortunately, the local media reporting on the TAP shootout on July 1st has caused unnecessary controversy where both sides have needed to advocate for their stance. We respect you for your response and are humbled by the outpouring support that we have received by our community. It is our goal to open with your formal approval. Can-Am Speedway voluntarily closed all events from April 11th through June 4th. We opened on June 5th, June 12th, and June 19th after implementing a pre-registration format which allowed race teams and essential employees to be on the Speedway grounds. All CDC guidelines during these events, except for plexiglass on the pit concession window openings, were in place and strictly enforced. This format, unfortunately, is not sustainable for the duration of the racing season at Can-Am Speedway, which is seasonal, similar to the local tourism and seasonal small businesses in the North Country. However, please hear us. We are not advocating for race teams and fans to come from all over the state. We are not a tourist attraction. We are advocating to open for our local race teams that support us weekly, obviously with the exception of the Canadian race teams who are unable to cross the border at this time. Many of our race teams live locally and come from a close geographical proximity to the Speedway. Therefore, since our race teams and competitors come from a close proximity, we are outdoors and we are limiting our capacity to 1/3%. We believe that this supports a low-risk operation, and even at low risk, we are strictly enforcing all CDC guidelines at a zero-tolerance policy. Some neighboring speedways have opened, and we would like to share some of that news with you. Fonda Speedway, located in Fonda, New York, operating at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds. They race with spectators Saturday, June 20th, Wednesday, July 1st, Saturday, July 4th, Sunday, July 5th. Genesee Speedway, located in Batavia, New York, operating at the Genesee County Fairgrounds, race with spectators Saturday, July 4th. Land of Legends Raceway, located in Canandaigua, New York, operating at the Ontario County Fairgrounds, race with spectators on Thursday, July 2nd. Thunder Mountain Speedway in Lisle, New York, race with spectators on Saturday, June 20th, Saturday, July 4th. Each and every one of the tracks listed have not received any government or political backlash as the Can-Am Speedway has. Each has continued to announce future weekly races with spectators with no limitation on the amount of spectators they are allowing to enter into their facility. Geographically, each track is not limited to one particular area. Rather, they are spread out across the state. Fonda in the east, Genesee in the west, Land of Legends in central New York, and Thunder Mountain in the south. We are advocating for Can-Am Speedway to be added to that list following that the other tracks did to operate. On July 1st, we opened following the U.S. District Judge Gary Sharp's injunction that reversed Cuomo's decision to extend operations on an outdoor gathering from July 1st to July 21st. After waiting in a socially distant line, defined by yellow painted markings on the ground, you bought your ticket and approached our ticket taker. Each guest was reminded about the regulations for the event to include no re-entry and zero tolerance with the New York State guidelines. Your face mask must be worn the entire time while moving about the facility to visit the concession stands, the novelty stands, the restrooms, etc. We were not going to tolerate any disrespect towards our staff. If non-compliant, that person would be escorted out of the facility without a refund. I'd like to note that this did not happen at all. Our race fans were very compliant with all of the guidelines. Once in, many selected their seat. Each group was spread out in a socially distant manner. When full, Can-Am Speedway can seat 4,000 people. We operated at a third capacity to leave ample room for social distancing between groups.
20%.
20%. But we were allowed for a third. While seating, many took off their face masks, and some elected to wear them all night. Either option is obviously permitted. As with other activities, we are now able to participating in, for example, local dining experiences. As spectators moved about the facility, they were able to visit the concession stands, the novelty booth, all of which had yellow marked, yellow painted lines on the ground for socially distanced spacing. We heard laughter, we heard excitement from our fans, and many compliments about the upgrades to the facility during the off-season. Those in attendance were happy to be back, and I continue to wonder what the response could or would have been
should the news line have stated, Cannon welcomes back spectators to celebrate the annual pep shootout to celebrate our 4th of July holiday. At this point, it's simply a what if, and we thank you for your time and consideration, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in having a formal approval.
Thank you. Next, anybody else would like to speak? Hearing none, we'll close privilege of the floor. Next, reading of minutes of last session, if anybody would request those. If not, is there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, then they'll stand as presented. Presentations of petitions, notices, and communications.
This evening, there are none.
Okay. Reports of standing committees.
We have a report of the Finance and Rules Committee reporting favorably on resolutions number 150, 151, 53, and 154.
Reports of county officers and others.
We have a report of the County Treasurer on investments and cash on hand, and we also have a report from the County Administrator on budget transfers. This month, we in addition have a report on the County Auditor from the County Auditor for erroneous assessments.
Local laws, resolutions, and motions. Resolution number 140, please.
Adopting the 2020-2021 Jefferson Community College budget.
Discussion? I got to take a wider look at this room now. Okay. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 141, please.
Appropriation for the conduct of Jefferson Community College for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 142.
Appointing members to the Jefferson Community College Board of Trustees.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 143.
Authorizing the vacating of judgment of foreclosure for owners of certain parcels of real property and discontinuance of foreclosure proceedings.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 144.
Concurring in the tax settlement, of the tax certiorari proceeding and authorizing refund of taxes in connection herewith. This is for Madison Barracks.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 145, please.
Authorizing agreement for performance of single audit of Jefferson County.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 146.
Appointing election commissioner.
Discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Michelle, congratulations. And Babette, we'll miss you. Good luck in your retirement. 147, please.
Authorizing appointment and reappointments to the Jefferson Lewis Workforce Development Board.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 148.
Amending the 2020 county budget in relation to employment and training department.
Discussion? None? Roll call.
Legislator Reed? Nebewanek? Flarco? Maxon? Cantwell? McBride? Grant? Ferris? Monticelli? Peck? Jarrow? Johnson? Drake? Doldo? Gray?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Resolution number 149.
Approval of request to renewal of a lease between the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority and the New York State Department of Transportation for airspace at the Thousand Islands Crossing.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Carried. 150.
Authorizing agreements with Federal Aviation Administration, Emergency Growth Enterprises, LLC, doing business as No Foam Systems, and McFarland Johnson Incorporated in relation to the Watertown International Airport film foam testing equipment seeker determination related thereto, and amending the 2020 county budget and capital plan.
Discussion? None? Roll call.
Legislator Grant. Johnson? Cantwell? McBride? Drake? Jarrow? Ferris? Peck? Monticelli? Reed? Maxon? Doldo? Nebewanik? Clarko? Gray.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Resolution number 151.
Amending the 2020 county budget in relation to Jefferson County's housing improvement program.
Discussion? None? Roll call.
Legislator Maxon? Clarko? Cantwell? Ferris? Doldo? Monticelli? Reed? McBride? Drake? Nebewanik? Jarrow? Johnson? Grant? Peck? Gray.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Resolution number 152.
Authorizing Jefferson County to be the lead agency under the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the purpose of the 2020 Jefferson County Snowmobile Trail GPS update and minor reroute pursuant to the New York State Snowmobile Grant and Aid Program, and making a determination of non-significance.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Carried. 153.
Authorizing fiscal year 2019 Operation Stone Garden grant agreement and amending the 2020 county budget in relation thereto.
Discussion? Yes, Mr. Maxon and Mr. Jarrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Operation Stone Garden is probably what I speak about the most, other than the county budget. Specifically, I asked at our last our committee meeting where this resolution was brought forward what the purpose of the grant funding was. The largest item is the purchase of automated license plate scanners, and I just want to pose to the members of this body just a bit of information, and then just a question for you in your hearts. The license plate scanners do more than just simply scan your license plate. They take a photograph of your car. They take a photograph of the occupants of your car. They know the time, the date, the place, the direction of travel, the speed that you're traveling. And over time, as you drive by these cameras, the government is able to build a very detailed profile of what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis. Where do you go? Where do you spend your time? Where do you spend your money? The vendors of this equipment, advertise the fact that you can pair them with cell phone scrapers to identify to the individual who is in the vehicle, that they can be used to enforce quarantines, find out who's breaking COVID quarantine so that you can go and lock them up. It is chilling. The amount of information, the detail of information that the government is able to collect is chilling. And that in recent history, if you look at how this data has been misused by the government, it has been used to target worshipers at mosques around New York City. It's been used by police officers to target the owners of vehicles that were frequently parked in front of gay bars in Washington, D.C. This isn't in the 30s. This isn't in the 70s. This is in 1998. This is in 2000. It was used by police officers to blackmail people who they thought they could blackmail using license plate scanners. It's been used around gun shops. They've been used around immigration centers. But more than anything else, the one legitimate purpose the government tends to use these for is to collect fines, outstanding fines. Is your insurance lapsed? Is your registration lapsed? Do you owe any fines to the court? Because that's really the overwhelming majority of uses. Police will like to say, well, if there's an Amber Alert or if there's a stolen car, we can find it. But 99.8% of the time, that's not what they're used for. And what's most troubling to me is that the data doesn't stay in the police car and it doesn't stay on the pole. The data is centralized. The data is given to private companies through regional sharing systems. Now, whether or not ours will be at the moment, I don't know. I didn't get any additional information since our last meeting, and 2 years ago when I asked the sheriff, she had no information for me. She referred me to the state, and as I said last week, the state had no information to give me. Private companies use government license plate scanners, particularly insurers and repossession companies. Rather than saving lives, rather than preventing terrorism, these license plate scanners generally are used to collect money from people whose only crime is being poor. And the question that I would ask, having painted a picture, and not even an unrealistic picture, a picture of how they're actually used. And if I can take a brief digression, we centralized the information regarding who had coronavirus, who had COVID early on in the outbreak. And we saw in our own county that police officers and government agents were willing to misuse their access to that database so that they could identify their neighbors who has the disease. The public needs to know. We know they accessed our database. We know they misused the public trust, and that's for a disease. This is even worse. This is a much bigger database. We know they've done it in the past. Even here locally, we know that other people around the country have misused access to this database. Knowing that it has been misused, knowing that it will be misused again, the government has come to our legislative board and has asked you to expand their surveillance of our citizens without a compelling reason. So I would like to know tonight, have you been given a compelling reason to expand the surveillance of our citizens, of our friends, and our neighbors? I think that the answer is a resounding no. I think that our sheriff got a grant, she's asking us for it, and she hasn't given me a compelling reason for us to expand the surveillance in northern New York, in Jefferson County. I will be voting no, as I always do. Tonight, I would urge you to join me in voting no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Maxon. Mr. Jarrell?
You all know that I had put the ratings of the Constitution. I was a lot of this is not I find that now that it's
Thank you, Mr. Jarrell. Anybody else? 153. Roll call.
Legislator Maxon.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Peck.
No.
Jarrow.
No.
Calarco. Goldo. Reed. Ferris. Cantwell. Drake. Grant. McBride. Ebewanik. Monticelli. Gray.
Yes.
Motion is defeated 5-10.
Resolution number 154.
Accepting gift of motor vehicles from the state of New York for its use in law enforcement.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 155.
Authorizing agreement for early warning wastewater surveillance platform in relation to COVID-19.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried. 156.
accepting funding and authorizing an agreement in connection with Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program.
Discussion? None? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Carried. That concludes our resolutions. Okay. Is there any other business to come before the board? Mr. Jarrell. Do you have a question? No, we're not moving any executive session. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jarrell. Next, anybody else want anything? Mr. Drake? What power do we have? Dave, do you want to come up? Do you want to address?
Heard since beginning of March. As you know, we are under a state of emergency, both at the state level and at the local level. That's provided for by Article 2B of the executive law for the state of New York. The local state of emergency is declared by Chairman Gray. The state, the state level state of emergency is declared by the governor. They're on a parallel track. Obviously, one covers the local county area, one covers the entire state. Having declared a state of emergency, emergency orders or executive orders may be issued under either of those states of emergency. We have not issued any executive orders or emergency orders at the local level at this stage. We could, but we have not. The state, however, has issued numerous executive orders, as we're well aware. And as the speakers have pointed out tonight, they are confusing, they are opaque, and difficult to follow even for those of us who try and do it on a day-to-day basis. But they are the law in the state because the governor has that authority to issue them under a state of emergency. The legislature has amplified on his authority by a bill that was passed at the beginning of March. Ordinarily, he would only have the authority to suspend a statute, local law, ordinance, order, rule, or regulation. That amendment to executive law now allows him to issue directives as well. And most of the activity that we're hearing complaints of right now are coming from his issuing of directives, things such as limiting the size of crowds, shutting down businesses, that sort of thing. Now, executive orders generally lack enforcement provisions. There's an exception for local executive orders that would be issued at our level. Violation of those orders are a Class B misdemeanor. However, those issued by the governor don't have a specific penalty provision attached to them. Therefore, what the governor has done is, through his power to make directives, tied in violation of his existing executive orders with other existing laws, and he's done that in three ways. First, in Executive Order 20211, he made any violation of any order limiting the operation or any type of facility or number of persons allowed at this facility to be deemed a violation of the New York State Uniform Fire and Building Code. And that is enforceable by the local jurisdiction. Depends on how the jurisdiction enforces. They may do it at the town level, they may do it at the village level. And of course, the county of Jefferson enforces for quite a number of towns here. That is what got us involved in the Can-Am Speedway situation. The second way he's tied us in, or tied his executive orders to a penalty, is in 20214. He made a violation of any directives on or after April 7th, 2020 to be punishable as a violation of Public Health Law 12B. That's a criminal sanction. The violation is a Class A misdemeanor enforceable by law enforcement. That would be any law enforcement, town, village, law enforcement, sheriff, and state police. And the third way he's done it is he's delegated authority to the Commissioner of Health to issue regulations and guidance on specific issues. And again, violation of the guidance or regulations of the Commissioner of Health is a violation of Sections 12 and 12B of the Public Health Law, which again is a misdemeanor. Brings us back to enforcement by law enforcement. So that's why enforcement at the local level is available. It is I don't want to say a requirement, but it is not something that can be ignored by local officials. To do so would be a violation of the oath we've all sworn to uphold the laws of the state of New York and the Constitution. There are other enforcement mechanisms the state has. Obviously, we've heard about various permits the state issues that can be jeopardized by failure of businesses or individuals to, they can lose privileges they have under those permits, be it through the Alcohol Control Board, public health permits to operate in eating establishment, so on and so forth. But that's the large picture of the enforcement scheme that's out there. So frankly, as far as this legislative board, we're pretty much stopped from taking any action to hinder enforcement at any level.
Thank you, David. Anybody else have anything? Yes, Mr. Mangielli.
Thank you, Chairman Gray. I have a question for the attorney. Attorney Kaufman. All these other counties that the Speedway brought out, Genesee, Fulton, Montgomery, I can't remember them all, but there's four at least. They're under the same executive orders, aren't they?
They are. I don't have any knowledge of what's specifically going on in those situations. I can tell you that on last Friday, I believe, the governor issued a new executive order continuing his prohibition on spectators at racetrack events through August 2nd. That's statewide. So that is the requirement from the state, and that's what I had communicated Speedway last week before their event that occurred then. They've made mention of a federal court ruling which the state has taken the position that that does not apply to their type of business. There was an effort by an attorney allegedly representing a Speedway association to try and get an order from that federal judge clarifying that it does apply to raceways in New York State. That attempt was denied by the judge. That's all I can tell you on that point.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else come before the board? Mr. Parrish. Thank you, Mr. Ferris. I do that every day. Just what you're requesting. Mr. Maxson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Attorney Paulson. You said our actions toward Can-Am Speedway were based on Executive Order 202.11? It's up higher on the mic.
Yeah, that would be the, that would
Uniform
be
building
assuming we took any affirmative action. It would probably be one of the options we had.
Okay.
I'm not saying whether we will or won't. I guess the next question is whether the Speedway will attempt to have another spectator event. And I don't know the answer to that.
Neither do I. But I have the portion of Executive Order 202.11 here in front of me. And what I read, and I just wanted to get your opinion on it, in the event of any such violation, any state, county, or local police officer authorized to enforce laws within the jurisdiction is authorized to remove persons. In the event of any such violation, any state, county, or local code enforcement official is authorized to enforce uniform code or other local building code. When it talks about enforcement in 202.11, it says that we are authorized to conduct enforcement, but at no point does it say we shall enforce. So to me, I see two different opportunities. We have the opportunity to enforce, we have the opportunity to not enforce and to allow the state, which the order says the state is authorized to enforce these codes. I would rather see a world where the state is authorizing their own. I assume that your time's not free. It costs us money to authorize, to enforce these orders. This regulatory burden is high. I would rather see the state enforce them than us enforce them.
I thoroughly agree, and I have made every effort to reach out through the State Attorney General's office to coordinate with them, and that effort is ongoing. And I certainly understand your point, and I'm pursuing it as best I can.
Thank you, Mr. Maxon. Mr. Drake? Thank you, Mr. Drake. And we work on that issue. Parity around the state and consistency, we work on that issue. Bob can attest to that. My persistency in that regard. So it's not lacking. So, Mr. Nabwanek?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly the people that spoke at the privilege of the floor tonight all spoke eloquently. I'm sure all of us feel the same way and feel, their perspective, where they're coming from. This is really, the bigger picture is it's the state of emergency, and this is a result of the governor having all this power given by the legislature at the state level. It's a function of one-party rule. This is kind of what you're going to get. And, at the local level here, we're all frustrated, obviously, and stuff. I know Mr. Gray, Mr. Weiss explained how you've helped them, and you've been working countless hours. And at this COVID-19 administration, the emails are every day, the updates are every day. We get them, and you're all over it. And then the amount of time, as a business owner, we all have our businesses that we're in too. The amount of, this is your full-time job, and I appreciate all the time you're putting in there. And I agree with Mr. Drake's statement. You're kind of a peacemaker here. We don't want to see any businesses hurt and stuff. I guess my perspective at this point is to, Mr. Paulson, keep gaining information from the state and stuff, because things change throughout this whole process of these last 3 months. An email on Wednesday is different from the email on Tuesday, and it's a moving curve all the time. And that's what we've learned, but it's the power of one person, basically. And it's very frustrating, but I guess, my perspective is that we keep working this problem as far as the directive goes to the, to the administration to enforce it or to not enforce it. I wouldn't be willing to say tonight, don't enforce these. Let's keep getting the information. Let's find out what these other counties are doing and work collectively together to make good decisions to work through this process for the residents of this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nabwanek. Anybody else? Mr. Doldo?
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I know we've had quite a few conversations, and you probably haven't talked on the phone any more than you have in the past 3 months with everybody and done a great job. A lot of this problem stems from the state, obviously. There's a lot of confusion out there. Different counties, different rules, regulations, whatever everybody's doing. That's why it's important for us as lawmakers. We know our area, we know what goes on, and we should be making choices, and if we need help, to refer back to New York State. The governor took on an awful big task that he can't handle. He doesn't know the areas. I hope this never happens again, but in the future, I think we know our people, we know our district. We as 15 legislators here have great staff that we can talk to and get direction from, and for him just to make all these different decisions on a hourly basis sometimes with you, and things changing, it's no wonder why businesses are pulling their hair out of their head. It's a struggle for businesses. You hate to see them fail. We have helped a couple of businesses ourselves that weren't functioning so that they could bring stuff over and we could help them sell stuff. But, you know, we're a close-knit community here, and we find ways to survive, but there's not much left in the survival for a lot of small businesses, and it's sad, and we really need to reiterate that to the governor that, you know, enough is enough. We've got it. We know what we need to do, and we need to move forward. So, again, I appreciate everything that everybody's done, the communications we've had, staff, administration, our employees have stepped up to the plate, but with everything that's changing constantly, I don't know how everybody keeps up with it, and it's very frustrating. Thank you.
Thank you. To that end, you can feel free, anybody can reach out to their state legislators. There is through Article 2B, Section 29B, maybe, there is a provision in there for concurrent resolutions that they can sponsor and write without a governor's signature, which is why that they're concurrent, and they can request any rollback of any one of the executive orders. So there is that provision in there. So, yep. Anybody else? Mr. Peck.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there any plan for reopening what businesses are left out of the current phase that we're in? Well, is there any plan? I mean, is there anything that's been expressed? I mean, we've had a you know, an individual tonight who's one that's left out of the current phase at this point because they're, you know, high contact, high risk.
He's open. They're open.
Okay. All right. So what's left then, I guess?
You got malls still open, indoor section of malls. You got gymnasiums, movie theaters, racetracks. You know, so there are still events, large gathering events, which are a concern right now, but they're on the docket still to be addressed and to be opened. Yep.
Okay. So to that effect, then, is there a timeline that is being expressed through the control room or from the governor's office, or not?
There's no timeline. No.
Okay.
The governor's staff has a habit of not getting in front of him. It's just the way they operate. So.
Okay. I mean, daily you're seeing the governor continues to expand the list on people that he wants voluntarily quarantining when they come in here from other states. Now, is that strictly just persons coming in, or is that going to go into even those that are just traveling through? Like, if, you know, tractor-trailer drivers who are coming through the state, you know, you have limits on number of hours that you can drive and you must stop.
Whole set of instructions regarding that.
Okay.
Detailed instructions already advising that. There are short-term, long-term, and like a midterm, right? But depending on, I can't cite you them. There's guidance for everything, and I can't cite that specifically, but it's online, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
The travel advisory is posted online. Yes. Yep. Mr. Monticelli.
Thank you, Chairman Gray. As I listen to my colleagues speak, a couple things come to mind. One is we're mostly talking about business, not health. And everybody knows it's a health crisis and consequently a business crisis. And the other point I guess I just want to say, I don't really have any depth to these comments, just comments I feel the need to make, is everybody deserves a second chance, but not a third chance. And if people are breaking the law, or if people are violating the rules, you can't use it as the excuse, well, he did it first. I mean, that reminds me of my fourth grade classroom. There was always, he did it first. Yeah, but I caught you. I don't know where you go with that. Just needed to say it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Monticelli. Anybody else like anything to offer to the board? Mr. Ferris? Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Mr. Reed?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the level of communication on this during this crisis, but you know, you made a point of get your state representatives involved. I think that's spot on because I haven't heard a lot from them. But so we have dirt tracks that have been running. They get a cease and desist order. People have been going by the rules. I will say Tyler really tried to go by the rules. He's been respectful during this situation. But there's no guidance from the state. The state, while tracks sat idle in our place, they were able to operate and with no recourse. And the chairman was on the phone and shared some of the conversations with me, and it was silence. My big thing, and he heard from me Saturday evening, was fireworks going on over in New York City over Macy's. I called today to try and get some answers. Well, guidance came out. They didn't say you couldn't have fireworks, but guidance came out on July 3rd. How does that work? How does that work? You know, I know it's all new territory, but the districts that have 4th of July fireworks that depend on the revenue, yeah, they got to make that decision 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. So it's not fair. And the state does need to get more involved and enforce their own policies, I think. But I do appreciate, Mr. Chairman, you actually calling me about businesses in my district, and David too. And I've been trying to handle those myself, and I'm sure other people are trying to do the same thing. Not come down heavy-handed, but say, you know, we got to work together to get through this. So that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, anybody else? Mr. Jarrell? Thank you, Mr. Jarrell. Anybody else? Mr. Dolgo?
Yeah, just one other thing, you know, with one that I had to battle with is the inconsistencies, and that's why I said it's important for the counties when there's a crisis like this, or the ice storm. I wasn't on, well, I don't believe during the ice storm, but the county knew what was going on and handled it quite well. Same thing with this here. I think we can do the same thing. We had different agencies with this crisis that's going on now with one constituent I had to deal with that trying to get answers with you, and you were the most helpful, and then getting attacked by 2 other agencies, New York State agencies, saying no, why are they doing this in business? And I had already had my homework done and had the answers, and in the end it was resolved and they backed down because of you helping out. But this is the problem: if you've got 2 different New York State agencies coming at you, and one doesn't know what the other one was doing. Same thing that happened in my business is, you know, you've got, I'm under Department of Ag and Markets. They're coming and telling me one thing, the governor's saying something else. I'm told the Department of Health's out there doing different things and trying to step on their toes. So there was a mass confusion here. If we handled this locally, this wouldn't have happened. We're 15 legislators were responsible. We worked together to get through with what we need to do, and I think for next time that should be, let the governor know that it's the best interest of the counties to handle these. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doldo. Anybody else? None? Motion to adjourn? Mr. Maxson, second. Mr. Pierce, all in favor? Aye.